I was somewhere in rural Kentucky when it happened. I'd been on the road for almost 10 hours, driving back home from a job site in Tennessee. It was supposed to be a straight shot highway all the way, but somewhere past Lexington, my GPS rerouted me. Road construction ahead, it said. I didn't think much of it. I just followed the blue line like I always did, trusting it to get me back safely. Before long, the road started to narrow. 2 lanes turned into 1. Streetlights disappeared. I passed fewer and fewer houses. The last gas station I'd seen was almost 20 miles back, and even that place had looked half abandoned. I was surrounded by trees now, thick woods on both sides. I didn't even have cell service anymore. I kept glancing down at the GPS screen, making sure I hadn't missed a turn. It still said I was on the right track. I told myself I'd be back on the main road in a few minutes. It was just past 1 a.m. when the pavement ended. The tires thumped down onto gravel, and a small wooden sign flashed by on my right. It was too dark to read what it said. I slowed down a little, rolling over loose stone and dirt, hoping this was just a short stretch before the road picked back up. The GPS still showed a blue line ahead, so I kept going. The road wound through the trees, no other cars in sight. My headlights cut through the dark, catching glimpses of branches and tall grass on either side. Every now and then I thought I saw movement in the woods, but it was probably just animals, deer or raccoons, maybe a coyote. I kept driving, eyes darting between the screen and the road. Then I came around a bend, and everything changed. There were 3 trucks parked across the road ahead. Big ones. 2 looked like older Ford pickups, maybe from the 90s, with rusted hoods and missing headlights. The 3rd was newer, matte black with dark-tinted windows. They were positioned at an angle, blocking the road completely. One of them had its headlights on, blasting straight into my windshield, making it impossible to see beyond them. I hit the brakes hard. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I came to a stop. For a second, I just sat there, unsure of what I was looking at. The GPS didn't react. The blue line still stretched forward, right through the trucks. Then 2 men stepped out from the shadows. They didn't run. They didn't wave. They just walked, slow and steady, toward my car. One was tall, wearing a flannel shirt and holding something in his hand. The other wore a sleeveless jacket, his arms covered in tattoos. I couldn't see their faces clearly through the glare, but they weren't in a hurry. They moved like they had all the time in the world, like they knew I wasn't going anywhere. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. This wasn't a detour. This wasn't construction. This was something else, something bad. I didn't wait to find out what. I slammed the gear shift into reverse and floored the gas. The tire spun for a second before gripping the gravel. The car jolted backward, bouncing over ruts and potholes. My back tires kicked up dust and stones, and I heard one of them yell something, though I couldn't make out the words. I kept my foot on the gas, not even looking behind me. I was going too fast, but I didn't care. I just knew I had to get away from there. The rear end fishtailed, and I fought the wheel, trying to keep it steady. The trees blurred past on either side, and for a moment I thought I was going to lose it, spin out, and crash into the ditch. But somehow, I kept control. After what felt like forever, I reached the bend again and took it hard, swinging wide. The car groaned in protest, but I didn't slow down. I just kept going back the way I came. I didn't see any headlights in my mirror, but I didn't stop to check if they were following. I drove fast, too fast for miles. Every corner I took felt like it would be my last. My hands were locked on the wheel, knuckles white. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I kept glancing at the GPS, but now it was glitching, frozen on the same screen, spinning endlessly. Finally, after what must have been 20 or 30 minutes, the gravel turned back into pavement. I hit the gas even harder, watching the trees blur past. I didn't relax until I saw the faint glow of streetlights in the distance, signs of life. A small town, maybe. I didn't care what it was. I just needed to be around people again. I pulled into a gas station on the edge of town. It was one of those 24-hour places with flickering fluorescent lights and a single guy behind the counter. I parked under the brightest light I could find and just sat there for a while, engine running, trying to breathe. Eventually I got out, walked around the car, checked the tires, the undercarriage. Everything looked okay. No damage. No one had followed me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd come close to something really bad. I didn't call the police. What was I going to say? I turned down the wrong road, and some guys scared me? I didn't even have a license plate or a good description. Besides, I just wanted to put distance between me and that place. I bought a coffee, got back in the car, and changed my GPS settings to avoid back roads completely. I stuck to the interstate after that, even if it meant going an hour out of the way. I didn't care. The main roads felt safer. I didn't stop again until I was almost home. Later, when I checked the route again in daylight, that gravel road didn't even show up on most maps. Just a thin line, unmarked and unnamed, cutting through a patch of woods in the middle of nowhere. I don't know what those guys wanted. Maybe it was just a robbery. Maybe worse. But I still think about it sometimes. How easily it could have gone another way. How fast everything turned from routine to dangerous. Now, whenever I drive at night, I double-check every turn. I keep my tank full and my doors locked. I don't trust the GPS blindly anymore. And if the road ahead looks wrong, I don't take chances. I turn around. I was driving through Colorado on my way to Utah after visiting a friend in Denver. It was late, past 1 a.m., and the road had gotten quiet. The kind of quiet where you start realizing how dark it really is out in the middle of nowhere. Just me, the soft hum of the engine, the headlights carving out a tunnel in the dark. I'd been on the road for hours, and my eyes were starting to burn. I needed a break, just 10 minutes to stretch, maybe splash water on my face. I saw a green highway sign that said rest area 1 mile. It was one of those tiny stops tucked off the interstate, the kind with a couple of vending machines and a bathroom. No gas, no lights except a few flickering bulbs, no staff. I figured it was better than nothing. I took the exit and pulled into the rest area. There was only one other car there, a dusty old sedan, tan or beige, hard to tell in the low light. What caught my eye was that all 4 of its doors were open. Wide open. No movement. No people. Just sitting there like it had been left in a hurry. I slowed as I drove past it and parked a few spaces down. My gut gave me that uneasy feeling, like something wasn't right. But I told myself maybe someone had car trouble and left it like that while they went to find help. Still, I kept the engine running while I looked around. The place was dead silent. The bathroom building sat about 50 feet from the lot. I got out of the car, left the door unlocked, something I never do, but I didn't plan to be more than a minute. As I walked toward the restroom, I looked back at the sedan again. Still no one. Not in the driver's seat. Not anywhere. I kept glancing around. There were no trucks, no RVs, nothing else parked. Just that car and mine. The second I stepped into the restroom, something felt off. The air was still. Cold, but not the kind of cold from outside. It was the kind that made your skin crawl. Like something had been there recently and left behind a trace you couldn't see. The lights inside were dim, buzzing faintly. One of them flickered every few seconds. The mirror over the sinks was cracked straight across. No sound came from anywhere. No toilets flushing, no water dripping, not even the low echo you usually get in places like that. It was total silence, like the whole building was holding its breath. I stood there for a moment, frozen. My hands were at my sides, not sure if I should wash my face or just turn around and leave. That's when I noticed the stall doors. 3 of them, all closed, but none of them were locked. Not one had a sign of being used. I didn't hear a single thing from behind them, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in there, that someone was behind one, just standing still. I didn't wait to find out. I turned and walked quickly back toward the door. I didn't run, but I was close. I stepped outside into the night air again, trying to act normal, but my heart was pounding. I didn't even look back at the sedan. I just fast walked toward my car and got in. I locked the doors the moment I sat down, then started to reverse out of the spot. As I turned the wheel and my headlights swung across the lot, I couldn't help glancing at the sedan again. That's when I saw it. There was a figure, a person, rising slowly from behind the open trunk. They stood up like they'd been crouching or hiding back there, and for a second I thought maybe they were hurt or needed help. But they didn't move. They didn't wave or step forward or say anything. Just stood there, watching. My headlights lit them up halfway. The lower half of their body was visible, but the rest was lost in shadow. I couldn't see their face. I didn't try to. I stared for maybe 2 seconds before I slammed the gear into drive and pulled out of there. I didn't stop again that night. I got back on the interstate and just drove. I kept checking my rear view mirror every few seconds, heart still racing, but no one followed me. There were barely any other cars on the highway. For miles, it felt like I was completely alone on the road. I kept thinking about the silence in that bathroom. The way the light flickered like it hadn't been touched in years. That cracked mirror. The closed stalls that felt like they were hiding something. And then the person just waiting behind the car, like they knew someone would eventually stop. I passed 3 more rest areas after that. Didn't stop once. I drove until sunrise. When I got to a larger town later that morning, I pulled into a gas station and sat in my car for a long time. I thought about calling someone, maybe the state patrol, maybe just to report something strange. But what would I even say? That I saw a person standing behind a car in the middle of the night? That a bathroom felt off. No crime, no threat, nothing clear. Just a bad feeling and a figure in the dark. A week later, I checked some local news out of curiosity. There was no report of a crime at that rest area. No missing person. No found bodies. Nothing. Maybe the person was just hitchhiking or sleeping rough. Maybe they weren't dangerous. Maybe. But I can still picture the moment I saw them rise behind that car. The slow movement. The way they didn't flinch when my headlights hit them. I think about how close I was to walking past that sedan, how I might have checked the trunk if I'd been more curious. I think about what might have happened if I'd spent even another minute inside that bathroom. Since then, I've avoided small rest stops when I travel. If it's not lit, not populated, or doesn't have cameras and people around, I keep going. Even if I'm exhausted. Even if I'm running on fumes. That night changed something in me. Not because something did happen, but because something almost did. And that's worse in some ways. The not knowing. I don't think I'll ever forget that rest area. Or the way the night felt just before I saw that person. Like the air itself was warning me, telling me to leave. I listened. And I think that's the only reason I'm here to tell the story. I was headed east on a long, empty stretch of highway somewhere in New Mexico. It was probably close to 1:45 in the morning. I'd been driving for hours, eyes heavy, arms stiff on the wheel. There was nothing around me, just scrubland, a low dark sky, and the faint glow of stars through thin cloud cover. Every few minutes, my headlights would catch a road sign or a patch of guardrail, but most of the time it was just blackness, broken by that endless yellow line down the center of the highway. I had the radio off. No music. No podcasts. I needed to focus. I remember I was between small towns, closer to nowhere than anywhere. My GPS had me on this route because the interstate was shut down for some kind of overnight maintenance. I wasn't happy about it, but I figured I'd just push through the back roads and make it to the next town by morning. The fuel tank was a little under half, enough to keep me going. The air conditioning was off, windows up, and the car had this dull smell of coffee and old fast food wrappers. My back ached from sitting too long. I thought about pulling over at the next gas station to stretch, but there hadn't been one in over an hour. That's when I saw him. He was walking along the right shoulder of the road, his figure lit up by my high beams before I even registered it. I eased off the gas a little. He was young, maybe early 20s. Skinny, light brown hair. Wearing a hoodie and jeans. His shoes looked torn. He had his thumb out like he was hitchhiking, though not very confidently, more like it was just habit. He didn't even look up as I passed him. His head stayed low, and he kept walking forward like he expected me to keep going, which I did. I didn't pick up hitchhikers. Never had. Not even in the middle of nowhere. As soon as I passed him, I felt a little bad. He looked worn down, alone. I glanced in the rearview, but the red glow from my taillights faded fast behind me, and within seconds, he was swallowed back into the dark. I told myself someone else would stop. Someone headed west, maybe. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept moving. It couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 minutes later when I saw him again. Same hoodie, same jeans, same long, slow walk along the shoulder, same posture, thumb out, barely raised. Except I had driven at least 5 miles since I last saw him. No way he could have gotten ahead of me. No shortcuts, no turnoffs, no parallel roads. Just one long highway in the middle of the desert. I stared at him as I passed. My heart was suddenly pounding. Not fast, but heavy. Deep, slow thuds in my chest. I looked in my mirrors again. Nothing. Just the dark. I kept driving. A little faster now. My hands were clammy. The air in the car felt warmer, like it had thickened. I rolled the window down a bit, but the outside air was just as dead. No wind. No sound. I reached for my phone and checked the GPS, even though I knew the route hadn't changed. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just more miles of nothing. I told myself it wasn't the same guy. Maybe just a coincidence. Maybe 2 hitchhikers dressed the same, or maybe I was overtired and imagining details. I'd been on the road for almost 9 hours by then. My brain wasn't working right, but I couldn't shake it. I kept watching the horizon now, watching for that shape to show up again. I even started counting the mile markers. I tried to remember exactly how far I'd gone since I'd seen him the first time. Nothing made sense. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No sign of him. I started to breathe easier. Maybe it was just a weird fluke. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Then I saw something in the mirror. He was standing dead center in the road behind me, not walking anymore, just standing still. I didn't see him appear. 1 second the road behind me was empty, the next second he was there in the middle of the lane facing straight at me. I nearly swerved. I slammed on the brakes for a second, then caught myself and kept going. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to be anywhere near that guy. The part of my brain that wanted to help people had shut off completely. It had been replaced by something colder, older, something more primal. All I wanted now was distance. I didn't see him again after that, but I kept checking my mirrors. Every minute, every 10 seconds. I kept thinking I'd see his silhouette there, just behind my taillights. I thought I'd maybe see him on the shoulder again, but he never showed up. What really messed with me was that I knew I wasn't dreaming. I hadn't nodded off, hadn't hallucinated. I was awake, alert. I remember the details too clearly. The way his shoes dragged, the loose strings on his hoodie, the shadows under his eyes. I didn't imagine it. It was the same guy. I didn't stop again that whole night. No bathroom break, no fuel stop. I didn't even pull over to rest my eyes. I just kept driving. Eventually, around 4:30 a.m., I hit the edge of a small town, Tucumcari, I think. There were streetlights, gas stations, diners, people. I saw 2 guys unloading a truck near a motel, and I almost felt relieved enough to cry. I pulled into a brightly lit parking lot near a fast food place and just sat there. I didn't even eat. I just sat with the engine running and the doors locked, trying to slow my breathing. I thought about reporting it, calling the cops, maybe, but what would I even say? That I saw a hitchhiker twice, and then he appeared in the road behind me somehow? That I thought he was stalking me even though there was no car, no bike, no way he could have followed? They'd write it off as exhaustion. Maybe that's what it was. But I know what I saw. I stayed in town until the sun came up. I filled my tank, got coffee, and when I finally started driving again, I stuck to main roads. No shortcuts. No back highways. I didn't care if it took longer. Even now, when I think back to that night, the part that sticks with me isn't how he looked or how he kept showing up. It's that final moment, when I looked in the rear view and saw him standing there. The way he was just there, like he'd been waiting the whole time, like he knew I'd look back. I never saw him again, but I still remember that face, expressionless, pale under my brake lights, just watching. And I never drive through New Mexico at night anymore. I work night shifts at a warehouse about 40 minutes outside of town. It's mostly quiet work, loading trucks and organizing freight, and I usually get off around 3 a.m. That night wasn't much different. Just me, the hum of forklifts, and the radio crackling low in the background. By the time I clocked out, I was bone tired. I just wanted to get home, shower, and sleep. The drive back takes me down a long, two-lane country road with barely any streetlights. It cuts through farmland and patches of woods. No gas stations, no houses close to the road, just a few gravel pull-offs and old barns. It's usually empty that late, and I know it like the back of my hand. I've been doing this drive for years. About 10 minutes into the drive, I turned onto the county road like I always do. That's when I noticed the headlights in my mirror. A white van had pulled out onto the road behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. A lot of farmhands use old vans or trucks, and sometimes I'll see another vehicle or two heading home at the same time. But something about this van caught my eye. It didn't have any license plates. No front plate, and when I checked again, nothing on the back either. It stayed about 4 or 5 car lengths behind me. Not too close, but not far enough for comfort. I let it go for a couple of miles, thinking maybe it was just a coincidence. But something in my gut was twitching. I slowed down a little. The van did too. I sped up just a touch. It matched my speed perfectly. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Long shifts, lack of sleep, empty road. Maybe I was just overthinking. Still, I decided to switch lanes at the next passing section just to see. I moved to the left lane, even though there was no one else around. The van moved left too. I moved back to the right.
So did the van.
I could feel my pulse starting to pick up. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. I turned off the radio and rolled my window down a crack. I needed to be fully alert. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't calm me down. I was starting to sweat. About 5 minutes later, I made a sudden turn onto a side road that looped back toward the main highway. I didn't use my blinker. The van followed. No hesitation. Just turned right behind me like it already knew the move I'd make. That's when I knew for sure something was wrong. I kept driving, making turn after turn, taking a few sharp ones that would have been easy to miss in the dark. But the van stuck behind me the whole time, never gaining, never falling back. No headlights flickering, no sign of radio interference, just silent pursuit. At one point, I pulled into a small gravel lot near an old closed-down gas station. I left my car running, lights on, and waited. The van slowed down, passed me slowly, and continued down the road. I let out a shaky breath, but I didn't relax. Something told me not to move just yet. Sure enough, about 30 seconds later, I saw the headlights turn around up ahead. The van came back and pulled into the same lot I was in. No hesitation, no confusion, like they knew I'd be there. I didn't wait to see who got out. I threw my car into drive and peeled out of that lot, gravel kicking up behind me. I sped down the road, heart hammering. I took 2 more turns, trying to lose them. Finally, I saw the main highway coming up. I merged onto it and floored it, watching the mirror the whole time. Nothing. A few minutes later, I caught sight of the van again. It had pulled off to the side of the road in an open field, just sitting there. No lights, no movement. It was angled toward the road, like it had parked there to wait or watch. I drove past without slowing down, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My chest was tight, and I could feel a tremor in my leg on the gas pedal. I kept watching the mirror until the highway curved enough to lose sight of the field. The van didn't follow me again. When I got home, I sat in my car for a full minute before going inside. My hands were shaking. I didn't call anyone. I didn't file a report. I just went inside, locked every door, and checked the windows twice. I didn't sleep much that morning. Days went by, and I kept thinking about that van. It wasn't just some drunk driver or someone lost on a back road. Whoever was in that van was following me on purpose. They knew how to trail without tailgating. They matched my every move, like they'd done it before. That's what got under my skin the most. It felt practiced. About a week later, I was reading local posts on a neighborhood app. That's when I saw it. A woman had written about something that happened while she was out walking her dog late at night near the edge of town, not too far from where I drive home. A white van had pulled up slowly behind her. No plates. She said the side door slid open while it was still moving. She screamed, and her dog barked like hell. The van took off before she could get a good look at the driver. But the details were the same. White van, no plates, silent, no logos, no windows in the back. That stopped me cold. Same description, same behavior, same area. That could have been me. I read the post again and again. She had reported it to the police, but so far nothing had come from it. No cameras caught it. No one saw the van leave. They told her they'd look into it, but she hadn't heard back. A few people commented on the post, saying they'd seen similar vans late at night. One guy said he saw one parked behind an abandoned barn last month, but thought it was just someone camping out. Another mentioned seeing one on his trail cam, parked in the woods behind his property at 4 a.m.
Just sitting there.
I haven't seen the van again since that night, but I changed my route. I don't take the country roads anymore. I stick to the main highway, even if it adds 20 minutes to my drive. I don't park in dark lots or pull-offs. I watch every vehicle that comes up behind me. I memorize plates. I keep my doors locked at all times, even while driving. And I started carrying something under my seat just in case. There was nothing supernatural about it. No shadows in the trees, no voices in my head. Just a van. Just a person, or maybe more than one, who knew what they were doing and didn't care about being seen. Someone who was out there, maybe looking for someone walking alone, or someone coming home from a late shift on an empty road. Someone like me. I was lucky. I don't think they expected me to react the way I did. Maybe they were waiting for me to stop or stall or get out of the car. Maybe they thought I'd be too tired to notice or too slow to act. I don't know what their plan was that night, but I know I wasn't imagining it. Every time I pass a white van now, especially one with no plates, I feel my chest tighten again. And I remember that field, that dark shape just sitting there in the grass, watching the road, waiting for someone else. It was around 2 a.m. when I pulled off the highway in West Texas. I'd been driving for hours, trying to get to El Paso by sunrise. The road had gone pitch black for miles, just me, the rumble of the tires, and the occasional jackrabbit darting across the asphalt. I was low on gas, and the warning light had been on for longer than I was comfortable with. When I finally saw the flickering green and red lights of a gas station sign in the distance, I felt a small wave of relief. The place looked old, run down. The kind of place that probably hadn't been renovated since the 80s. A single gas pump stood crooked under a rusted awning. The store behind it was dimly lit, its front window covered with yellowed flyers and faded advertisements for lottery tickets and Marlboros. There wasn't another car in sight. I pulled in, left the engine running, and stepped out to pump gas. The wind was dry and warm, sweeping dust across the lot. Crickets chirped somewhere out in the brush, but otherwise, it was dead silent. After filling the tank, I figured I'd grab a bottle of water and maybe something sugary to keep me awake for the rest of the drive. The door creaked loudly as I walked inside. The clerk was a middle-aged guy slouched behind the counter. He looked like he'd been asleep seconds before I came in, eyes half-lidded, slow to focus. He didn't say a word, just nodded once and looked back down at whatever was on the counter, maybe a magazine or a radio. I walked the short aisles, grabbed a bottle of water and a candy bar, and walked up to pay. The transaction was quick, silent, and awkward. I thanked him, even though he didn't seem to hear me, and pushed the door open again. I was about halfway across the lot when I saw him. There was a man standing beside the driver's side door of my car. He wasn't there when I went in. I know for a fact. I would have seen him. The gas station lights weren't bright, but they were enough to see the area around the pump, and there's no way I could have missed someone just standing there. He was tall. Not huge, just tall. Wearing a dark hoodie, jeans. His hood was up, hands at his sides. I couldn't see his face clearly, but he was looking right at me, the way people do when they've been waiting. I stopped. Just froze. He didn't move for a second, then slowly raised one hand and held something up. "You dropped your wallet," he said. My stomach turned cold. My instincts kicked in. I reached behind me, patted my back pocket. My wallet was there, firm and flat where it should be. I didn't say anything, didn't nod, just stood there, eyes locked on the thing in his hand. He smiled, small and subtle. Then he stepped forward, real casual, and placed whatever he was holding gently on the hood of my car. After that, he turned and walked off into the dark, past the edge of the lot, toward the empty road and the desert beyond. No car, no bike. Just walked. I didn't move until he was out of sight. Then I looked at what he'd left behind. It wasn't a wallet.
It was a baseball cap.
Old, sun-bleached red. The white threads frayed along the edges. The bill was bent nearly in half from age or maybe habit. What made my stomach twist was the dark brownish stain along the rim, dried blood, old enough to have soaked deep into the fabric. And on the inside of the cap, written in faded black marker, was a name. First name only, Corey. I stood there a minute longer, heart pounding hard in my chest. The wind kicked up a little, tossing grit into my eyes. I blinked, looked around the lot again, but there was no sign of him. No figure walking in the distance, no movement in the shadows. Nothing but flat land, cactus, and darkness. I didn't want to touch the hat. I didn't want to get back in the car either, but I had to. I wasn't staying another minute at that gas station. I walked wide around the driver's side, keeping my eyes on the shadows, opened the door quickly, and slid in, locked it immediately. Then I just sat there for a moment, staring out through the windshield at the cap on my hood. I wanted to drive off, but the thought of that thing flying up and hitting my windshield made my skin crawl. So I got out again, quick and tense, walked around to the front, grabbed the hat by its very edge, and flung it into the trash can near the pump. I didn't check to see if it made it all the way in. I didn't care. I jumped back in the car, slammed the door, and sped out of there faster than I probably should have. Back on the highway, I kept checking my rear-view mirror, but no cars showed up behind me. No headlights. No sign of the man. Still, something didn't sit right. I couldn't shake it. About 10 miles down the road, I saw flashing lights up ahead, red and blue. A sheriff's SUV and a couple of highway patrol cruisers were parked just off the shoulder. One officer was placing cones. Another was talking to a man sitting on the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket. I slowed down as I passed and saw a car off in the ditch. Crumpled hood, windshield shattered. Looked like it had rolled. I considered pulling over, telling them what happened, but what would I even say? Some guy tried to hand me a bloody hat and walked off into the desert? That wasn't a crime. Just creepy as hell. I kept going. When I got to El Paso around sunrise, I pulled into a motel lot and parked. I was too wired to sleep, too tired to think. So I sat there a while, letting the engine tick as it cooled, watching the sky lighten from black to dusty purple. Out of curiosity, I pulled out my phone and looked up anything I could find about missing people named Corey in West Texas. Nothing popped up immediately. Too vague. But I did find an old news article from a local outlet dated 2 years back. The story was short, buried behind a paywall, but the visible preview mentioned a young man named Corey, last seen at a gas station near I-10, west of Fort Stockton. His car was found abandoned. No foul play suspected. No updates since. I don't know for sure if that hat was his. I'll never know what that man wanted. Maybe it was some sick prank. Maybe he thought he could scare me into getting out of the car. Or maybe he wanted something worse. I've thought about it 100 times, replayed the way he moved, the way he smiled. I don't think he was trying to help me. That wasn't the look someone gives when they're doing a good deed. It was more like he was watching a reaction he'd seen before. Like he'd done it before. I still drive late at night sometimes. Can't always avoid it. But I don't stop at those empty gas stations anymore. I fill up before dark. Stay on busy routes when I can. And if I see someone near my car when I come back out, I don't talk, I don't ask, I get in and drive. Because sometimes it's not ghosts or monsters you need to be afraid of. It's just people. It was around 3 a.m., and I was driving north through rural Michigan. I'd been on the road for a few hours, trying to make it to Petoskey before morning. I don't usually drive that late, but I had a late start leaving Detroit, and I figured I'd rather drive through the night than deal with morning traffic. The roads were empty. Just 2 lanes cutting through endless trees, and barely a streetlight to be seen after midnight. I had the windows cracked open a little to keep myself awake, and the cold night air helped. So did the radio, even though it kept fading in and out the farther I got from civilization. I hadn't seen another car in maybe half an hour when it happened. I came around a gentle bend in the road, and suddenly, my headlights lit up a man standing dead center in the lane. He wasn't wearing reflective gear. No flashlight. Nothing. Just jeans, a dark jacket, and his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. I had maybe 3 seconds to react. I swerved hard to the right, tires kicking up gravel as I crossed over the shoulder. My heart slammed into my chest, and I honestly thought I clipped him, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, he was still standing there, completely still, like he hadn't even flinched. I slowed down for a few seconds, watching him fade in the mirror, half thinking maybe I should turn around. Maybe he needed help or something. But there was something about the way he stood there, just watching, not even moving a muscle. Not even looking scared that a car nearly hit him. I shook it off. Figured maybe he was drunk or high and wandered into the road from somewhere. Not my problem. I kept going. Not even a full minute later, I saw him again. Same posture. Same jacket.
Same guy.
Standing right in the middle of the road again, like he'd been teleported there. Same dead expression. Hands in his pockets. Nothing around him. No driveway. No side roads. No sign of headlights behind me where he could have come from. Just trees and darkness. I slammed the brakes, harder this time. My tire squealed, and I felt the whole car jolt. I didn't stop completely, but I dropped to a crawl. He was looking straight at me, face blank, like he wasn't seeing me at all. Just standing there. I swerved around him again, this time keeping more distance, wheels bumping over the shoulder, then sped up without looking back. My brain started racing. Was I overtired? Seeing things? I sat up straighter in the seat, blinked hard, checked my side mirrors, even rubbed my eyes a little, trying to shake off the feeling. But no, I saw him both times. It wasn't a hallucination. I couldn't make up that much detail.
It was the exact same guy.
Same look, same stance. I felt a knot start tightening in my gut. There was nothing around me. No lights, no houses, no stores. Just dark woods and road. The GPS didn't show any towns nearby, and I hadn't passed anything open for miles. The phone had barely 1 bar. I thought about pulling over, but the idea of stopping anywhere out there felt worse than just driving faster. I kept the speed at around 70, trying not to look in the mirrors too much. I told myself it had to be a trick of the light, maybe a weird stretch of road, maybe some messed up twins playing a prank, though that didn't really make any sense either. But I needed to believe something normal, because the other possibility, the idea that something was seriously wrong out there, wasn't something I wanted to think about. 15 minutes passed, then 20. No sign of him. No more people in the road. I was just starting to convince myself I'd imagined it or misunderstood what I saw. Maybe it wasn't even the same guy. Maybe the first one turned around and walked back or something when I crested a hill, and there he was again. Dead center in the lane.
Same man.
Same posture. Same face. Hands still in his pockets. Eyes locked on my car. I felt my breath catch. This time I didn't slow down. I floored it. Swerved hard around him without lifting my foot off the gas. The whole car shook as I barely stayed on the shoulder, gravel pinging against the underside. I checked the mirror again, and this time I saw him turn his head slowly to watch me go by. I drove faster after that. My palms were sweating, and I kept wiping them on my jeans. I didn't know what to think anymore. My brain kept trying to line things up and find something normal to explain it, but nothing fit. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me that fast. There were no cars on the side of the road, no cut-throughs or shortcuts. Just 2 lanes and black forest. I kept driving like that for another half hour, nerves shot, every muscle in my arms and back tensed. Every time I rounded a corner or went over a hill, I braced myself to see him again. But I didn't. Not for a while. Finally, after what felt like forever, I started seeing signs for a small town, Cross Village. I'd been aiming for Petoskey, but I didn't care anymore. I needed to be around people. I needed streetlights and gas stations and cell service. Anything but more trees and that silent man in the road. When I hit the edge of the town, I almost laughed from relief. A blinking yellow light at a four-way stop. A closed gas station. Houses. Driveways. Street signs. It looked like heaven. I pulled into a small diner parking lot even though it was closed. I just needed to sit somewhere that wasn't the middle of nowhere. I turned off the engine and sat there, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the empty sidewalk. The sky was just starting to lighten in the east. I waited until the sun was fully up before I left that lot. I drove the rest of the way in daylight, and I didn't see him again. I never figured out who he was or how he kept getting ahead of me. I checked the news the next day, looked online, searched for reports of a man hit on that road, or people playing pranks, or any explanation at all. There was nothing. No missing persons. No accidents. No other drivers reported anything strange. But I know what I saw. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't dreaming. He was real. He was there more than once, standing in the exact same spot, miles apart, without ever seeming to move.
It still gets to me.
Every time I drive alone at night, especially through wooded areas, I think about that man. I keep checking the road ahead just a little more than I used to. And I never, ever take those lonely back roads anymore, not even if GPS tells me to. It was close to 1:45 a.m., and I was somewhere deep in northern Arizona, heading east on a quiet two-lane road that barely had any lights. The stretch of highway I was on had no towns for miles. Just desert brush, wide open space, and a moon that didn't do much to light anything up. My phone had no signal for at least the last 40 minutes, and I hadn't seen another car in longer than that. The road had a silence to it that made everything feel a little off, like something was watching from the dark. I'd been driving for hours already, and fatigue was creeping in, but I wasn't tired enough to risk pulling over. Every once in a while, I'd roll the window down just to wake myself up a bit. That's when I saw her. Off to the right, on the shoulder, a woman in jeans and a white tank top, arms waving like she was in trouble. She didn't look like she was injured, but the way she was moving, frantic, panicked, it didn't seem like she was just asking for help with a flat tire or something simple. I slowed down. My first instinct told me to keep going, but it felt wrong to leave her out there in the middle of nowhere. I stopped about 15 feet ahead of where she stood and rolled my window down halfway, not all the way, just enough to talk through. She stepped up quickly to the window, talking fast. She said her boyfriend had hit her and left her there. Her voice was shaky, like she was on the edge of crying, and she told me her phone had died. She needed help, wanted me to call the cops or give her a ride. I didn't answer her right away. I was just about to ask her to step back, so I could call the police when something in my side mirror caught my eye. At first, it didn't register what I was seeing. Just slow movement, almost like a shadow stretching toward my car. Then I focused and my stomach dropped. There was a man crawling, on his elbows and knees, low to the ground like he was trying not to be seen. He was coming out from the ditch just behind my car, moving toward the back passenger side door. I didn't even look back at the woman. I just reacted. I slammed my foot on the gas, hard. The engine screamed, and the tires jerked on the asphalt as I sped off. The passenger door wasn't shut all the way from when I had rolled the window down and cracked it open slightly for air earlier. It flew open and slammed shut again from the force. I didn't care. The car swerved a little as I pulled away, and for a second I thought I felt the back of the car dip, like someone might have grabbed onto the bumper or tried to climb in, but I didn't stop to check. I drove faster than I should have on a road like that, eyes flicking between the rearview mirror and the road ahead. My hands were clamped so tight on the steering wheel that my fingers went numb. I kept expecting headlights behind me. Someone chasing. But there was nothing. Just blackness, and the road stretched in front of me like a ribbon that never ended. I drove for another 20 minutes without seeing a single house, gas station, or even a signpost. I had no signal, still. I didn't stop. Not until I reached a diner with a single flickering, open 24 hours sign. It sat at the edge of a gravel parking lot with two old pickups parked out front and a semi idling nearby. I pulled in fast, parked right under one of the overhead lights, and locked my doors. I sat there for a while, breathing heavy. My hands were still shaking. My mind kept replaying the image of that guy crawling toward my car. His clothes were dark, so he blended in with the night, and that's what scared me the most, how close he got without me hearing a thing. If I hadn't caught that movement in the mirror when I did, I might have opened the door. Or he might have gotten inside when I wasn't looking. I kept wondering if the woman was working with him, if it was some kind of setup. After about 10 minutes of just sitting and staring at the diner, I finally went inside. It smelled like old grease and stale coffee, but I didn't care. The waitress looked up, gave me a polite nod, and asked what I wanted. I asked if I could use their phone. She handed it over without a word. I called the local sheriff's department and told them everything. They sent a deputy out to meet me. I waited for nearly an hour before he showed up. He was a younger guy, real polite but tired looking, like he'd been on shift a while. I gave him every detail I could remember, the road I was on, how far back it seemed, what the woman looked like, what the guy was doing. He didn't say much while I talked, just wrote things down in a little notebook. When I was done, he nodded and told me I made the right call by not stopping any longer than I did. Said the area I was in had seen a few incidents like that before, people flagging down cars and then trying to rob or carjack them. He didn't confirm anything, but the way he said it told me it wasn't some rare thing out there. I asked if he was going to send someone to check the area. He said yes, but the chances of finding anyone now were slim. Too much open land, too many places to disappear. He gave me his card and told me to call if I remembered anything else. I sat in that diner until the sun started rising, ordered some coffee I didn't really drink, and tried to calm down. I kept looking out at my car, making sure no one was near it. Every time a truck pulled into the lot, I tensed up. Eventually, the sky started turning orange and traffic picked up a little. I felt safer once the light came back. That's when I got back in the car and kept driving, finally heading towards civilization. But the whole time, I couldn't stop checking my mirrors. Couldn't stop wondering how long that guy had been in the ditch. If he'd been watching for a while, just waiting for someone to stop. If they had picked that spot because they knew people would feel guilty about leaving a woman alone in the dark. It was a trap. I'm almost sure of it. A setup. Whether she was in on it or not, I'll never know. But the timing was too perfect. Her panic, the dead phone, the location, middle of nowhere. Since then, I don't stop for anyone on the side of the road at night. I call it in if I have signal, but I don't stop. Not anymore. Because I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't seen him. Maybe they would have robbed me. Maybe worse. All I know is I came way too close to finding out. I was driving down Route 50 through Nevada sometime after 11 p.m. The road was dead quiet. They call it the loneliest road in America, and it lived up to the name. I'd been behind the wheel for hours, just endless stretches of darkness broken by my headlights. No gas stations, no houses, no lights in the distance. Nothing but scrubland and desert on either side. The only sound in the car was the low hum of the tires and the occasional rattle from the glove compartment. The air felt dry and cold, and I kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting near the heater vent. The road just kept going, a straight, empty line stretching ahead into the black. Around midnight, I noticed headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At first, I was almost relieved. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, and something about another set of headlights made me feel like I wasn't entirely alone out there. But something started to feel off pretty quickly. The vehicle was a beat-up old sedan. Hard to tell the exact make from the lights and shape, but it looked low to the ground and kind of dented up. The strange part was that it stayed right behind me, same distance, same speed, never trying to pass. Just far enough back to avoid my brake lights fully lighting up its windshield. I slowed down a little, just to see if it would go around. It slowed down too. That's when I really started paying attention. I nudged the accelerator, sped up to about 70. It kept pace. I pushed it to 75, then 80. Still there. There was no one else around. No lights, no signs, no exits, nothing. Just me and this car that seemed to have decided it was going to stick to me like glue. My hands were tighter on the steering wheel now, eyes flicking from the road to the mirror more than I liked. I kept telling myself maybe they were nervous too. Maybe they didn't want to be alone out here, and following someone made them feel safer. But even as I tried to convince myself of that, the longer they stayed behind me, the worse the feeling got. I kept thinking they'd get bored or turn off. Maybe they'd take an unmarked side road, or pull over to pee or swap drivers or whatever.
But no.
Mile after mile, they just followed. I started to feel the pressure in my chest, like I was being watched. Like something wasn't quite right. After about 20 more minutes of this, I decided to test something. I put on my turn signal and started to slow down like I had a flat. I pulled to the side of the road, gravel crunching under the tires as I came to a stop. My hazard lights ticked on. The sedan kept coming, its headlights bright as ever. I could see it clearer now. Dented hood, one headlight slightly out of alignment. The driver didn't stop, but right as it passed me, the car's headlights suddenly turned off. No brake lights, no taillights, just gone. But the car didn't stop moving. It kept rolling down the road, slowly, maybe 10 or 15 miles an hour, coasting past me and into the dark like something in a dream. Just the silhouette of that messed up sedan against the moonlit road. I sat in my car, engine running, hazards clicking steadily. 10 minutes passed, maybe longer. I kept looking down the road, expecting to see those headlights flicker back on. Maybe waiting for the driver to reverse, or pull over up ahead, or something. But nothing happened. No light, no engine sounds, no brake lights in the distance. Just stillness. My mouth was dry, and I could feel the thump of my heartbeat in my ears. I turned off the hazards and sat there in silence, hand resting on the gear shift. I thought about staying put until sunrise, but the idea of just sitting there, vulnerable, made my skin crawl. If they were trying to scare me, they'd done it. And if it wasn't a prank, then I didn't want to be parked out here in the middle of nowhere while whoever that was waited up ahead. So I eased back onto the road. Slowly at first, then picked up speed. No sign of the car, not even tire tracks in the dust. I drove faster, my eyes locked on the road, mirrors checked constantly. Still no sign. I pushed the car harder than I ever had. I don't know how long I drove at 90, maybe more. Every slight bump made the wheel tremble. I kept expecting to see them parked on the side or crawling up behind me again. But nothing. For the next hour, it was back to how it was before, just empty road, darkness on both sides, and the hum of the tires. Eventually, the skies started to lighten, faint pink and gray just barely touching the horizon behind me. I didn't feel relief, exactly, but the daylight made it a little easier to breathe. Around 6 a.m., I finally rolled into a small town, gas station, diner, a couple of motels. I pulled into the first place with a lit sign and parked in the corner of the lot, engine still running. I just sat there for a while, staring at the sky getting brighter. I never saw the sedan again. Never saw it parked on the side of the road. Never passed it pulled over anywhere. Never caught another glimpse of those lights. I checked the local news later, tried to find anything. Maybe a stolen car report, maybe a warning about a prowler or a road scam, something. But nothing came up. To this day, I don't know who was in that car or what they wanted. Maybe it was some unhinged loner playing a game. Maybe someone trying to mess with people on that stretch of road just to get a thrill. Or maybe they were planning something worse, and I just didn't give them the chance. But I never drove that route again. And if I ever have to, I won't do it at night. I'd been driving for hours, longer than I should have. My eyes were starting to burn, and I'd already slapped my face twice to keep myself from dozing off at the wheel. The road was mostly dark, the kind of dark where your headlights only light up the immediate strip ahead, and everything else feels like a black void. It was one of those stretches of highway that feels endless, no real towns for miles, just occasional green signs pointing to dirt roads or gas stations that might be closed. I knew I couldn't make it another hour. I was too tired. My head was heavy, and I'd already drifted too close to the shoulder once. That scared me enough to make me look for the next place to stop. I didn't care if it was clean or comfortable. I just needed a bed, or, at the very least, a place to park and close my eyes. Around midnight, I spotted a small motel off the side of the highway. The kind of place that looks like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Flat roof, faded paint, a half-lit sign with a couple letters burned out. The parking lot was cracked and uneven, and there were weeds growing through the cement in places. I didn't care. I slowed down, pulled in, and parked under a flickering yellow light. My car was one of only 3 there. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, rubbing my eyes and checking my phone. No messages. A few missed calls from earlier in the evening, nothing urgent. I wasn't even going to check in right away. I just wanted a second to breathe and stretch before walking into the office. I figured I'd take a minute, maybe scroll a bit to feel normal before going inside. That's when I noticed it. The rooms all faced the lot in a long, narrow strip. 1 story, all identical windows, all the same thick brown curtains. But every single one of those curtains was slightly open. Not wide, not obvious, just a small part pulled back, maybe a few inches. Just enough for someone to peek out. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe they'd been cleaned and not closed properly. Maybe guests had left them like that. But it was all of them. Every room. 20 or so doors. 20 slightly parted curtains. And that's when it started to feel off. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. No movement. No faces. Just those narrow slits. I looked away for a second, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe even something normal I'd never noticed at other motels. But then something shifted behind the curtain of the room closest to my car. It was quick, but clear. A shadow, just enough movement to catch in the corner of my eye. I looked straight at it and froze. Nothing moved after that. No footsteps. No hand pulling the curtain back further. But I knew I'd seen it. Something had shifted behind that curtain, and it hadn't been my reflection or the wind. The window was too high for either to make sense. Suddenly, everything about that motel felt wrong. The cracked parking lot, the flickering light above me, the dead silence around the whole place. I couldn't hear anything, not bugs, not cars on the highway, not even wind. Just my own breath and the low hum of my engine cooling. I stared at the curtain for a few more seconds, almost waiting for something else to move. But nothing did. No signs of life. No signs of anything, really. And that made it worse. If I'd seen someone clearly, even just an old man watching TV or someone walking past the window, it might have grounded me, made me feel like I was just imagining things. But the stillness, the sameness of all those peeking curtains, it was unsettling in a way I didn't know how to explain. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't even reach for my bag or think about going to the office. I just started the engine again, trying to keep my breathing normal. I didn't peel out or anything. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I just slowly backed out of the spot and turned toward the exit. I glanced back once in the mirror, and I swear, just for a second, I thought one of the curtains moved again. I didn't look a second time. I pulled out onto the highway and headed in the opposite direction. I ended up at a truck stop about 20 minutes down the road. It was bright, busy enough for the hour, with a few semis parked and a diner still serving coffee and pie to a couple drivers. I parked close to the building, under one of the big overhead lights, and locked the doors. I reclined the seat just a little and tried to relax. I didn't even want to go inside. I felt safer just staying in the car where I could see everything. But even then, my nerves were shot. My mind kept replaying that line of windows. All those curtains slightly open. All those empty rooms. The quiet. The shadow. I didn't sleep much. Maybe 20 or 30 minutes, in patches. Every time I dozed off, I'd jolt awake thinking I saw something outside the car. I finally went inside the diner around 2:30 a.m. and got a coffee and sat near the window, just watching the lot. I stayed there until the sun started to come up, and then I felt like I could breathe again. Later that morning, I looked up that motel online. I found it easily. It was still listed, but there weren't many reviews. The ones I did find were strange. Nothing too specific, just things like odd vibe, or didn't feel comfortable staying. One review mentioned the curtains too, saying it felt like someone was always watching. That was it. No details, no warnings. Just uneasy people who probably did the same thing I did. Pulled in, stayed a minute, and left. I kept driving that day, didn't talk to anyone about it. It sounds small when I say it out loud. A line of open curtains, a shadow, no real danger. But something was wrong there. I know it. I could feel it in my gut, in that deep, primal way you feel when you're not safe. Whatever that place was, whoever was in those rooms or behind those windows, I'm glad I didn't stay. And now, whenever I drive late at night, no matter how tired I am, I think twice before pulling into a place like that. I'd rather sleep in my car at a gas station with lights and cameras and people around than trust a silent motel that stares at you through its curtains. I was driving through the Fort Pitt Tunnel just outside Pittsburgh around 1:15 in the morning. I'd been on the road for hours, heading back from a job in Ohio, and all I could think about was getting home, taking a shower, and crawling into bed. My eyes felt heavy, and the yellow lines on the road were starting to blur a little, that hypnotic kind of tired, where everything looks the same. As I entered the tunnel, I noticed a car in my rear-view mirror. It was maybe 5 or 6 car lengths behind me, a dark sedan, probably black or navy, with one of those blue-tinted headlights. I didn't think anything of it at first. The tunnel was nearly empty, just me, that car, and the hum of my tires echoing off the concrete walls. Halfway through the tunnel, the sedan suddenly flashed its high beams. Not just once, but 3 or 4 times, quick and bright, lighting up my whole interior like a camera flash. It startled me, and I sat up straighter, blinking. I thought maybe I had cut the guy off earlier without realizing it, or maybe my taillights were acting up. Either way, I didn't react. I just kept driving, eyes forward, hands tight on the wheel. When we came out of the tunnel, the road opened up and curved toward the bridge. That's when the sedan sped up. It moved into the left lane and pulled up alongside me. I glanced over just long enough to see the driver, a guy maybe in his 40s with a baseball cap on backwards, waving his hand and gesturing down toward my car. I couldn't hear him, but he kept motioning for me to roll my window down. I didn't want to. I never do that kind of thing late at night, especially not when I'm alone, but something about the urgency in his movements made me pause. I cracked the window just a couple of inches, just enough to hear. The wind was loud, but I caught it, he shouted. "There's someone on your roof." My stomach dropped. It didn't make sense. I instinctively hit the brakes hard. My tires squealed a little, and the car jolted as I pulled over to the shoulder. The guy in the sedan slowed down too, and kept going, but he shouted again before disappearing ahead. "Check your roof." I jumped out of my car, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The highway was nearly empty, just a few cars in the distance, and the only sound was the rush of wind and the low rumble of a semi passing on the far side. I looked up at the roof of my car. Nothing. Then I walked around to the back. That's when I saw them, muddy handprints on the rear windshield. Several of them. Smudged, wet, real. Not dry dirt, but thick, clumpy mud. And down the side of the car, faint streaks, as if someone had slid off. Not dragged. Slid. I stood there frozen, the smell of damp soil hitting my nose, mixed with the metallic tang of my own sweat. I looked around again. There was no one nearby, no place someone could hide. Just the steep concrete walls on one side and the barrier overlooking the river on the other. I didn't know what to think. I opened all the doors and checked the back seat. Empty. I even got down on my knees and looked under the car. Nothing. I stood up slowly, trying to put the pieces together. The prints weren't dry, which meant whoever it was had been on there recently. Very recently. Maybe even in the tunnel. I hadn't stopped for hours. Not since I got gas in Steubenville around 11:45. That station had been almost deserted. Just me and the clerk inside, who looked half asleep. I remembered I went inside to pay with cash. I'd only been away from the car for 2 or 3 minutes at most. Could someone have gotten on the roof then? But even if they had, how would I not have heard them? Felt them? I got back in the car and sat there for a minute with the engine running, headlights casting a wide glow on the shoulder. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. I checked my phone. 1 bar of signal. I considered calling the cops, but what would I say? That someone might have been riding on my roof, through a tunnel, and then vanished? I didn't even see anyone. And the guy in the sedan was gone. I didn't have a plate number, just some muddy smears and a growing sense of unease. Eventually, I got back on the highway. I kept checking my mirrors, glancing up at the roof through the sunroof, trying to convince myself it was over, that maybe it was a prank or a weird hallucination or some dirty road debris I hadn't noticed until someone pointed it out. But the way the mud was smeared, the way it streaked downward, it didn't feel random. I got off the highway about 15 minutes later, in a part of Pittsburgh I wasn't super familiar with. I pulled into a brightly lit gas station, just to regroup. I walked around the car again. The handprints were still there, starting to dry now. I took pictures this time. I even wiped one of them with a tissue. It was real mud, thick with tiny specks of leaves and gravel. Then I noticed something else. Just above the rear driver's side window, there were faint scratch marks on the paint. Thin, shallow, but noticeable in the right light. Not from a branch. These were vertical, like fingernails. 4 of them. I drove the rest of the way home jittery, checking every sound, every shadow. I parked under the bright floodlight in my apartment lot and checked the car one last time. Nothing new. No more prints. No sign anyone had tried to get back in or on. Still, I barely slept that night. The next day, I took the car to a self-wash and scrubbed every inch of it. As I sprayed down the back windshield, the mud ran down in thick brown streaks, and for a second I imagined someone lying flat on the roof, their fingers pressed against the glass, holding on. The image made my stomach twist. Later that week, I told a coworker what happened. He half joked that maybe it was some kind of stunt, or maybe someone trying to sneak a ride across state lines. But neither of us laughed, because the truth is I don't know what it was, and I don't think I ever will. What gets me still is that I never heard anything. No footsteps, no thumps, not even a whisper of weight shift, just a guy flashing his brights to warn me. And when I stopped, whoever it was already gone. But they had been there. Someone was definitely on my roof.